On the horse, he rode up to Armstid's and came back on the horse, leading Armistid's team. We hitched up and laid Cash on top of Addie. When we laid him down, he vomited again, but he got his head over the wagon bed in time.
He taken a lick in the stomach too.
The horse may have kicked him in the stomach too, I said. Did he kick you in the stomach, Cash? He tried to say something. Dewey Dell wiped his mouth again.
What's he say?
What is it, Cash?
She leaned down.
His tools.
Vernon got them and put them into the wagon. Dewey Dell lifted Cash's head so he could see. We drove on, Dewey Dell and I sitting beside Cash to steady him, and he riding on ahead on the horse. Vernon stood watching us for a while. Then he turned and went back toward the bridge. He walked gingerly, beginning to flap, the wet sleeves of his shirt as though he had just got wet. He was sitting the horse before the gate. Armistid was waiting at the gate. We stopped and he got down and we lifted Cash down and carried him into the house, where Mrs. Armistid had the bed ready. We left her and Dewey Dell undressing him. We followed Pa out to the wagon. He went back and got into the wagon and drove on, we following on foot into the lot. The wedding had helped, because Armistid said,
"You're welcome to the house. You can put it there."
He followed, leading the horse, and stood beside the wagon, the reins in his hand.
"I thank you. We'll use in the shed yonder. I know it's an imposition on you."
"You're welcome to the house."
He had that wooden look on his face again, that bold, surly, high-colored, rigid look like his face and eyes were two colors of wood, the wrong one pale and the wrong one dark. His shirt was beginning to dry, but it still clung close upon him when he moved.
"She would appreciate it."
We took the team out and rolled the wagon bayed under the shed. One side of the shed was open.
"It won't rain under, but if you'd rather."
Back of the barn was some rusted sheets of tin roofing. We took 2 of them and propped them against the open side.
"You're welcome to the house."
"I thank you. I'd take it right kind if you'd give them a little snack."
"Sure. We'll have supper ready soon as she gets Cash comfortable."
He had gone back to the horse and he took taking the saddle off, his damp shirt lapping flat to him when he moved. Pa wouldn't come in the house.
"Come in and eat. It's nigh ready."
"I wouldn't crave nothing. I thank you."
"You come in and dry and eat. It'll be all right here."
It's for her. It's for her sake I am taking the food. I got no team, no nothing. But she will be grateful to arrow one of you."
"Sure. You folks come in and dry."
But after Armistid gave Pa a drink, he felt better, and when we went in to see about Cash, he hadn't come in with us. When I looked back, he was leading the horse into the barn. He was already talking about getting another team, and by supper time he had good as bought it. He is down there in the barn, sliding fluidly past the gaudy lunging swirl into the stall with it. He climbs onto the manger and drags the hay down and leaves the stall and seeks and finds the curry comb. Then he returns and slips quickly past the single crashing thump and up against the horse, where it cannot overreach. He applies the curry comb, holding himself within the horse's striking radius with the agility of an acrobat, cursing the horse in a whisper of obscene caress. Its head flashes back, tooth-cropped. Its eyes roll in the dusk like marbles on a gaudy velvet cloth as he strikes it upon the face with the back of the curry comb.
By time I give him another sup of whiskey and supper was about ready. He had done already bought a team from somebody, on a credit. Picking and choosing he were by then, saying how he didn't nice the span, and wouldn't put his money in nothing so-and-so owned, not even a hen coop. "You might try Snopes," I said. "He's got 3-4 span. Maybe one of them would suit you." Then he begun to mumble his mouth, looking at me nice it was me that owned the only span of mules in the county, and wouldn't sell them to him, when I knew that like as not it would be my team that would ever get them out of the lot at all. Only I don't know what they would do with them, if they had a team. Little John had told me that the levee through Haley Bottom had done gone for 2 miles, and that the only way to get to Jefferson would be to go around by Motson. But that was Ance's business.
"He's a close man to trade with,"
he says, mumbling his mouth. But when I give him another sup after supper, he cheered up some. He was aiming to go back to the barn and set up with her. Maybe he thought that if he just stayed down there ready to take out Santa Claus would maybe bring him a span of mules.
But I reckon I can talk him around. A man'll always help a fellow in a tight, if he's got a drop of Christian blood in him.
Of course you're welcome to the use of mine, I said, me knowing how much he believed that was the reason.
I thank you. She'll want to go on our own.
And him knowing how much I believed that was the reason. After supper Jewel rode over to the bend to get Peabody. I heard he was to be there today at Varner's. Jewel come back about midnight. Peabody had gone down below Inverness somewhere, but Uncle Billy come back with him, with his satchel of horse physic. Like he says, a man ain't so different from a horse or a mule, come long come short, except a mule or a horse has got a little more sense.
What you been into now, boy?
He says, looking at Cash.
Give me a mattress and a chair and a glass of whiskey.
He made Cash drink the whiskey, then he run Ants out of the room.
Lucky it was the same leg he broke last summer.
Anne says, mournful, mumbling and blinking.
That's something.
We folded the mattress across Cash's legs and set the chair on the mattress, and me and Jewel sat on the chair, and the gal held the lamp, and Uncle Billy taking a chew of tobacco and went to work. Cash fought pretty hard for a while, until he fainted. Then he laid still, with big balls of sweat standing on his face like they had started to roll down, and then stopped to wait for him. When he waked up, Uncle Billy had done packed up and left. He kept on trying to say something until the gal leaned down and wiped his mouth.
It's his tools.
I brought 'em in, I got them.
He tried to talk again, she leaned down.
He wants to see them.
So Darl brought them in where he could see them. They shoved them under the side of the bed, where he could reach his hand and touch them when he felt better. Next morning Ants taken that horse and rode over to the bend to see Snopes. Him and Jewel stood in the lot talking a while, then Ants got on the horse and rode off. I reckon that was the first time Jewel ever let anybody ride that horse, and until Ants come back he hung around in that swole-up way, watching the road like he was half a mind to take out after Ants and get the horse back. Along toward 9 o'clock it begun to get hot. That was when I see the first buzzard. Because of the wedding, I reckon. Anyway, it wasn't until well into the day that I see them. Lucky the breeze was setting away from the house, so it wasn't until well into the morning. But soon as I see them it was like I could smell it in the field a mile away from just watching them, and them circling and circling for everybody in the county to see what was in my barn. I was still a good half a mile from the house when I heard that boy yelling. I thought maybe he might have fell into the well or something, so I whipped up and come into the lot on the lope. There must have been a dozen of them setting along the ridge pole of the barn, and that boy was chasing another one around the lot like it was a turkey, and it just lifting enough to dodge him and go flopping, bait to the roof of the shed again where he had found it setting on the coffin. It had got hot then, right, and the breeze had dropped or changed or something, so I went and found Jewel, but Lula come out.
You got to do something. It's a outrage.
That's what I aim to do.
It's a outrage. He should be lauded for treating her so.
He's getting her into the ground the best he can. So I found Jewel and asked him if he didn't want to take one of the mules and go over to the bend and see about Ants. He didn't say nothing. He just looked at me with his jaws going bone wide and them bone wide eyes of his, then he went and begun to call Darl. What you fixing to do? I said. He didn't answer. Darl come out.
Come on.
What you aim to do?
Going to move the wagon.
Jewel said over his shoulder. Don't be a fool. I never meant nothing. You couldn't help it. And Darl hung back too, but nothing wouldn't suit Jewel.
Shut your goddamn mouth.
It's gotta be somewhere. We'll take out soon as Pa gets back.
You won't help me?
Jewel says, them wide eyes of his kind of blaring, and his face shaking like he had a gare.
No, I won't. Wait till Pa gets back.
So I stood in the door and watched him push and pull at that wagon. It was on a downhill, and once I thought he was fixing to beat out the back end of the shed. Then, the dinner bell rung. I called him, but he didn't look around. Come on to dinner, I said. Tell that boy. But he didn't answer, so I went on to dinner. The gal went down to get that boy, but she come back without him. About half through dinner we heard him yelling again, running that buzzard out.
It's a outrage. A outrage.
He's doing the best he can. A fellow don't trade with Snopes in 30 minutes. They'll set in die shade all afternoon to dicker.
Do. He's done too much already.
And I reckon he had. Trouble is, his quitting was just about to start or doing. He couldn't buy no team from nobody, let alone Snopes, withouten he had something to mortgage he didn't know would mortgage yet. And so when I went back to the field I looked at my mules and same as told them goodbye for a spell. And when I come back that evening and the sun shining all day on that shed, I wasn't so sure I would regret it. He come riding up just as I went out to the porch, where they all was. He looked kind of funny. Kind of more hangdog than common, and kind of proud too. Like he had done something he thought was cute but wasn't so sure now how other folks would take it.
I got a team.
You bought a team from Snopes.
I reckon Snopes ain't the only man in this country that can drive a trade.
Sure, I said. He was looking at Jewel with that funny look, but Jewel had done got down from the porch and was going toward the horse. To see what ants had done to it, I reckon.
Jewel.
Jewel looked back.
Come here.
Jewel come back a little and stopped again.
What you want?
So you got a team from Snopes. He'll send them over tonight, I reckon. You'll want to early start tomorrow, long as you'll have to go by Motson. Then he quit looking like he had been for a while. He got that badgered look like he used to have, mumbling his mouth.
I do the best I can. For God, if there were e'er a man in the living world suffered the trials and floutings I have suffered.
A fellow that just beat Snopes in a trade ought to feel pretty good. What did you give him, Ants? He didn't look at me.
I give a chattel mortgage on my cultivator and cedar.
But they ain't worth $40. How far do you aim to get with a $40 team? They were all watching him now, quiet and steady. Jewel was stopped halfway back, waiting to go on to the horse.
I give other things.
He begun to mumble his mouth again, standing there like he was waiting for somebody to hit him and him with his mind already made up not to do nothing about it.
What other things?
Hell. You take my team. You can bring them back. I'll get along some way.
So that's what you were doing in Cash's clothes last night.
Darl said. He said it just like he was reading it out of the paper. Like he never give a darn himself one way or the other. Jewel had come back now, standing there, looking at Ants with the marble eyes of his.
Cash aimed to buy that talking machine from Surratt with that money.
Ants stood there, mumbling his mouth. Jewel watched him. He ain't never blinked yet.
But that's just $8 more.
Darl said, in that voice like he was just listening and never give a darn himself.
That still won't buy a team.
Ants looked at Jewel, quick, kind of sliding his eyes that way, then he looked down again.
God knows, if there were e'er a man.
Still they didn't say nothing. They just watched him, waiting, and him sliding his eyes toward their feet and up their legs but no higher.
And the horse.
What horse?
Ants just stood there. I be darned, if a man can't keep the upper hand of his sons, he ought to run them away from home, no matter how big they are. And if he can't do that, I be darned if he oughtn't to leave himself. I be darned if I wouldn't.
You mean you tried to swap my horse?
Ant stands there, dangle-armed.
For 15 years I ain't had a tooth in my head. God knows it. He knows in 15 years I ain't ate the victuals he aimed for man to eat to keep his strength up, and me saving a nickel here and a nickel there so my family wouldn't suffer to buy them teeth so I could eat God's appointed food. I give that money. I thought that if I could do without eating, my sons could do without writing. God knows I did.
Jewel stands with his hands on his hips, looking at Ants. Then he looks away. He looked out across the field, his face still as a road, like it was somebody else talking about somebody else's horse, and him not even listening. Then he spit, slow, and said,
Hell.
And he turned and went on to the gate and unhitched the horse and got on it. It was moving when he come into the saddle, and by the time he was on it, they was tearing down the road like the law might have been behind them. They went out of sight that way, the two of them looking like some kind of a spotted cyclone. Well, I says. You take my team, I said. But he wouldn't do it and they wouldn't even stay, and that boy chasing them buzzards all day in the hot sun, until he was nigh as crazy as the rest of them. Leave Cash here, anyway, I said. But they wouldn't do that. They made a pallet for him with quilts on top of the coffin, and laid him on it and set his tools by him, and we put my team in and hauled the wagon about a mile down the road.
If we'll bother you here, just say so.
Sure. It'll be fine here. Safe, too. Now let's go back and eat supper.
I thank you. We got a little something in the basket. We can make out.
Where'd you get it?
We brought it from home.
But it'll be stale now. Come and get some hot victuals. But they wouldn't come.
I reckon we can make out.
So I went home and ate and taken a basket back to them and tried again to make them come back to the house.
I thank you. I reckon we can make out.
So I left them there, squatting around a little fire, waiting, God knows what for. I come on home. I kept thinking about them there and about that fellow tearing away on that horse. And that would be the last they would see of him. And I be derned if I could blame him. Not for wanting to not give up his horse, but for getting shut of such a dern fool as Ants. Or that's what I thought then. Because be derned if there ain't something about a dern fellow like Ants that seems to make a man have to help him, even when he knows he'll be wanting to kick himself next minute. Because about an hour after breakfast next morning, Eustace Grimm that works Snope's place come up with a span of mules, hunting ants. I thought him and Ants never traded, I said.
Sure. All they liked was the horse. Like I said to Mr. Snopes, he was letting this team go for $50, because if his Uncle Flem had just kept them Texas horses when he owned them, Ants wouldn't have never.
The horse. Ants's boy taken that horse and cleared out last night, probably halfway to Texas by now, and Ants.
I didn't know who brung it. I never see them. I just found the horse in the barn this morning when I went to feed, and I told Mr. Snopes and he said to bring the team on over here.
Well, that'll be the last they'll ever see of him now, sure enough. Come Christmas time they'll maybe get a postal card from him in Texas, I reckon. And if it hadn't have been Jewel, I reckon it'd have been me. I owe him that much, myself. I be derned if Ants don't conjure a man, some way. I be derned if he ain't a sight.
Now there are 7 of them, and little tall black circles. Look, Darl, I say, see? He looks up. We watch them in little tall black circles of not moving. Yesterday there were just 4, I say. There were more than 4 on the barn. Do you know what I would do if he tries to light on the wagon again?
What would you do?
I wouldn't let him light on her, I say. I wouldn't let him light on Cash either. Cash is sick. He is sick on the box. But my mother is a fish.
We got to get some medicine in Matson. I reckon we'll just have to.
How do you feel, Cash?
It don't bother none.
Do you want it propped a little higher?
Cash has a broken leg. He has had 2 broken legs. He lies on the box with a quilt rolled under his head and a piece of wood under his knee.
I reckon we ought to left him at Armstid's.
I haven't got a broken leg and Pawson and Darl hasn't and...
It's just the bumps. It kind of grinds together a little on a bump. It don't bother none.
Jewel has gone away. He and his horse went away one supper time.
It's because she wouldn't have us beholden. For God, I do the best that e'er a man.
Is it because Jewel's mother is a horse, Darl? I said.
Maybe I can draw the ropes a little tighter.
That's why Jewel and I were both in the shed and she was in the wagon because the horse lives in the barn and I had to keep on running the buzzard away from.
If you just would.
And Dewey Dell hasn't got a broken leg and I haven't. Cash is my brother. We stop. When Darl loosens the rope, Cash begins to sweat again. His teeth look out.
Hurt?
I reckon you better put it back.
Darl puts the rope back, pulling hard. Cash's teeth look out.
Hurt?
It don't bother none.
Do you want Pa to drive slower?
No. Ain't no time to hang back. It don't bother none.
We'll have to get some medicine at Matson. I reckon we'll have to.
Tell him to go on.
We go on. Dewey Dell leans back and wipes Cash's face. Cash is my brother. But Jewel's mother is a horse. My mother is a fish. Darl says that when we come to the water again I might see her and Dewey Dell said.
She's in the box. How could she have got out?
She got out through the holes I bored. Into the water, I said. And when we come to the water again I am going to see her. My mother is not in the box. My mother does not smell like that. My mother is a fish.
Those cakes will be in fine shape by the time we get to Jefferson.
Dewey Dell does not look around.
You better try to sell them in Matson.
When will we get to Matson, Darl?
Tomorrow. If this team don't crack to pieces, Snopes must have fed them on sawdust.
Why did he feed them on sawdust, Darl?
Look. See?
Now there are 9 of them, tall and little tall black circles. When we come to the foot of the hill, Pa stops and Darl and Dewey Dell and I get out. Cash can't walk because he has a broken leg.
Come up, mules.
The mules walk hard, the wagon creaks. Darl and Dewey Dell and I walk behind the wagon, up the hill. When we come to the top of the hill, Pa stops and we get back into the wagon. Now there are 10 of them, tall and little tall black circles on the sky.
I happened to look up and saw her outside the window, looking in. Not close to the glass, and not looking at anything in particular, just standing there with her head turned this way and her eyes full on me and kind of blank too, like she was waiting for a sign. When I looked up again, she was moving toward the door. She kind of bumbled at the screen door a minute, like they do, and came in. She had on a stiff-brimmed straw hat setting on the top of her head and she was carrying a package wrapped in newspaper. I thought that she had a quarter or $1 at the most, and that after she stood around a while she would maybe buy a cheap comb or a bottle of toilet water, so I never disturbed her for a minute or so except to notice that she was pretty in a kind of sullen, awkward way, and that she looked a sight better in her gingham dress and her own complexion than she would after. She bought whatever she would finally decide on. Or tell that she wanted. I knew that she had already decided before she came in. But you have to let them take their time. So I went on with what I was doing, figuring to let Albert wait on her when he caught up at the fountain, when he came back to me.
That woman! You better see what she wants.
What does she want?
I don't know. I can't get anything out of her. You better wait on her.
So I went around the counter. I saw that she was barefooted, standing with her feet flat and easy on the floor, like she was used to it. She was looking at me, hard, holding the package. I saw she had about as black a pair of eyes as ever I saw, and she was a stranger. I never remembered seeing her in Matsun before. What can I do for you? I said. Still she didn't say anything. She stared at me without winking. Then she looked back at the folks at the fountain. Then she looked past me, toward the back of the store. Do you want to look at some toilet things? I said. Or is it medicine you want?
That's it.
She looked quick back at the fountain again. So I thought maybe her ma or somebody had sent her in for some of this female dope and she was ashamed to ask for it. I knew she couldn't have a complexion like hers and use it herself, let alone not being much more than old enough to barely know what it was for. It's a shame, the way they poison themselves with it. But a man's got to stock it or go out of business in this country. Oh, I said. What do you use? We have. She looked at me again, almost like she had said hush, and looked toward the back of the store again.
I'd like for to go back there.
All right, I said. You have to humor them. You save time by it. I followed her to the back. She put her hand on the gate. There's nothing back there but the prescription case, I said. What do you want? She stopped and looked at me. It was like she had taken some kind of a lid off her face, her eyes. It was her eyes, kind of dumb and hopeful and sullenly willing to be disappointed all at the same time. But she was in trouble of some sort, I could see that. What's your trouble? I said. Tell me what it is you want. I'm pretty busy. I wasn't meaning to hurry her, but a man just hasn't got the time they have out there.
It's the female trouble.
Oh, I said. Is that all? I thought maybe she was younger than she looked, and her first one had scared her, or maybe one had been a little abnormal as it will in young women. Where's your ma? Haven't you got one?
She's out yonder in the wagon.
Why not talk to her about it before you take any medicine? Any woman would have told you about it. She looked at me, and I looked at her again and said, How old are you?
17.
Oh. I thought maybe you were. She was watching me. But then, in the eyes all of them looked like they had no age and knew everything in the world, anyhow. Are you too regular, or not regular enough? She quit looking at me but she didn't move.
Yes. I reckon so. Yes.
Well, which? Don't you know? It's a crime and a shame, but after all, they'll buy it from somebody. She stood there, not looking at me. You want something to stop it? Is that it?
No. That's it. It's already stopped.
Well, what? Her face was lowered a little, still, like they do in all their dealings with a man, so he don't ever know just where the lightning will strike next. You are not married, are you?
No.
Oh. And how long has it been since it stopped? About 5 months maybe.
It ain't been but 2.
Well, I haven't got anything in my store you want to buy unless it's a nipple. And I'd advise you to buy that and go back home and tell your pa, if you have one, and let him make somebody buy you a wedding license. Was that all you wanted? But she just stood there, not looking at me.
I got the money to pay you.
Is it your own, or did he act enough of a man to give you the money?
He give it to me. $10. He said that would be enough.
$1,000 wouldn't be enough in my store, and 10 cents wouldn't be enough. You take my advice and go home and tell your pa or your brothers if you have any, or the first man you come to in the road. But she didn't move.
Leif said I could get it at the drugstore. He said to tell you, me and him wouldn't never tell nobody you sold it to us.
And I just wish your precious Leif had come for it himself, that's what I wish. I don't know, I'd have had a little respect for him then. And you can go back and tell him I said so. If he ain't halfway to Texas by now, which I don't doubt. Me, a respectable druggist, that's kept store and raised a family and been a church member for 56 years in this town. I'm a good mind to tell your folks myself, if I can just find who they are. She looked at me now, her eyes and face kind of blank again like when I first saw her through the window.
I didn't know. He told me I could get something at the drugstore. He said they might not want to sell it to me, but if I had $10 and told them I wouldn't never tell nobody.
He never said this drugstore. If he did or mentioned my name, I defy him to prove it. I defy him to repeat it, or I'll prosecute him to the full extent of the law, and you can tell him so.
But maybe another drugstore would.
Then I don't want to know it. Me, that's. Then I looked at her. But it's a hard life they have, sometimes a man, if there can ever be any excuse for sin, which it can't be. And then, life wasn't made to be easy on folks, they wouldn't ever have any reason to be good and die. Look here, I said. You get that notion out of your head. The Lord gave you what you have, even if he did use the devil to do it, you let him take it away from you if it's his will to do so. You go on back to Leif and you and him take that $10 and get married with it.
Leif said I could get something at the drugstore.
Then go and get it, I said. You won't get it here. She went out, carrying the package, her feet making a little hissing on the floor. She bumbled again at the door and went out. I could see her through the glass going on down the street. It was Albert told me about the rest of it. He said the wagon was stopped in front of Grummet's hardware store, with the ladies all scattering up and down the street with handkerchiefs to their noses, and a crowd of hard-nosed men and boys standing around the wagon, listening to the marshal arguing with the man. He was a kind of tall, gaunt man sitting on the wagon, saying it was a public street and he reckoned he had as much right there as anybody, and the marshal telling him he would have to move on, folks couldn't stand it. It had been dead 8 days, Albert said. They came from some place out in Yoknapatawpha County, trying to get to Jefferson with it. It must have been like a piece of rotten cheese coming into an anthill, in that ramshackle wagon that Albert said folks were scared would fall all to pieces before they could get it out of town, with that homemade box and another fellow with a broken leg lying on a quilt on top of it, and the father and a little boy sitting on the seat and the marshal trying to make them get out of town.
It's a public street. I reckon we can stop to buy something same as every other man. We got the money to pay for hit, and hit ain't nary law that says a man can't spend his money where he wants.
They had stopped to buy some cement. The other son was in Grummet's, trying to make Grummet break a sack and let him have 10 cents worth, and finally Grummet broke the sack to get him out. They wanted the cement to fix the fellow's broken leg some way.
Why, you'll kill him. You'll cause him to lose his leg. You take him on to a doctor, and you get this thing buried soon as you can. Don't you know you're liable to jail for endangering the public health?
We're doing the best we can.
Then he told a long tale about how they had to wait for the wagon to come back and how the bridge was washed away, and how they went 8 miles to another bridge, and it was gone too. So they came back and swum the ford, and the mules got drowned, and how they got another team and found that the road was washed out. and they had to come clean around by Mott's son, and then the one with the cement came back and told him to shut up.
We'll be gone in a minute.
We never aim to bother nobody.
You take that fellow to a doctor.
I reckon he's all right.
It ain't that we're hard-hearted. But I reckon you can tell yourself how it is.
Sure, we'll take out soon as Dewey Dell comes back. She went to deliver a package.
So they stood there with the folks backed off with handkerchiefs to their faces, until in a minute the girl came up with that newspaper package.
Come on. We've lost too much time.
So they got in the wagon and went on. And when I went to supper it still seemed like I could smell it. And the next day I met the marshal and I began to sniff. And said, "Smell anything?"
I reckon they're in Jefferson by now.
Or in jail. Well, thank the Lord it's not our jail.
That's a fact.
Darl and Jewel and Dewey Dell and I are walking tip the hill, behind the wagon. Jewel came back. He came up the road and got into the wagon. He was walking. Jewel hasn't got a horse anymore. Jewel is my brother. Cash is my brother. Cash has a broken leg. We fixed Cash's leg so it doesn't hurt. Cash is my brother. Jewel is my brother too, but he hasn't got a broken leg. Now there are 5 of them, tall and little tall black circles. Where do they stay at night, Darl? I say. When we stop at night in the barn, where do they stay? The hill goes off into the sky. Then the sun comes up from behind the hill and the mules in the wagon and Pa walk on the sun. You cannot watch them, walking slow on the sun. In Jefferson, it is red on the track behind the glass. The track goes shining round and round. Dewey Dell says so. Tonight I am going to see where they stay while we are in the barn.
Jewel, I say, whose son are you? The breeze was setting up from the barn, so we put her under the apple tree, where the moonlight can dapple the apple tree upon the long, slumbering flanks, within which now and then she talks in little trickling bursts of secret and murmurous bubbling. I took Vardaman to listen. When we came up, the cat leaped down from it and flicked away with silver claw and silver eye into the shadow. Your mother was a horse, but who was your father? Jewel?
You goddamn lying son of a bitch.
Don't call me that.
You goddamn lying son of a bitch.
Don't you call me that, Jewel. In the tall moonlight, his eyes looked like spots of white paper pasted on a high small football. After supper, Cash began to sweat a little.
It's getting a little hot. It was the sun shining on it all day, I reckon.
You want some water poured on it, we say. Maybe that will ease it some.
I'd be obliged. It was the sun shining on it, I reckon. I ought to thought and kept it covered.
We ought to thought, we said. You couldn't have suspicioned.
I never noticed it getting hot. I ought to minded it.
So we poured the water over it. His leg and foot below the cement looked like they had been boiled. Does that feel better? We said.
I'm obliged. It feels fine.
Dewey Dell wipes his face with the hem of her dress. See if you can get some sleep, we say.
Sure. I'm right obliged. It feels fine now.
Jewel, I say. Who was your father, Jewel?
God damn you. God damn you.
She was under the apple tree, and Darl and I go across the moon and the cat jumps down and runs. And we can hear her inside the wood.
Here, put your ear close.
I put my ear close and I can hear her. Only I can't tell what she is saying. What is she saying, Darl? Who is she talking to?
She's talking to God. She is calling on him to help her.
What does she want him to do?
She wants him to hide her away from the sight of man.
Why does she want to hide her away from the sight of man, Darl?
So she can lay down her life.
Why does she want to lay down her life, Darl?
Listen.
We hear her. We hear her turn over on her side.
Listen.
She's turned over. She's looking at me through the wood.
Yes.
How can she see through the wood, Darl?
Come, we must let her be quiet, come.
She can't see out there, because the holes are in the top. How can she see, Darl?
Let's go see about Cash.
And I saw something Dewey Dell told me not to tell nobody. Cash is sick in his leg. We fixed his leg this afternoon, but he is sick in it again, lying on the bed. We pour water on his leg and then he feels fine.
I feel fine. I'm obliged to you.
Try to get some sleep, we say.
I feel fine. I'm obliged to you.
And I saw something Dewey Dell told me not to tell nobody. It is not about Pa, and it is not about Cash, and it is not about Jewel, and it is not about Dewey Dell, and it is not about me. Dewey Dell and I are going to sleep on the pallet. It is on the back porch, where we can see the barn, and the moon shines on half of the pallet, and we will lie half in the white and half in the black, with the moonlight on our legs. And then I am going to see where they stay at night while we are in the barn. We are not in the barn tonight, but I can see the barn, and so I am going to find where they stay at night. We lie on the pallet, with our legs in the moon. Look, I say, my legs look black. Your legs look black, too.
Go to sleep.
Jefferson is a far piece. Dewey Dell.
What?
If it's not Christmas now, how will it be there? It goes round and round on the shining track. Then the track goes shining round and round.
Will what be there?
That train. In the window.
You go to sleep. You can see tomorrow if it's there.
Maybe Santa Claus won't know they're town boys. Dewey Dell.
You go to sleep. He ain't going to let none of them town boys have it.
It was behind the window, red on the track shining round and round. It made my heart hurt, and then it was Pa and Jewel and Darl and Mr. Gillespie's boy. Mr. Gillespie's boy's legs come down under his nightshirt. When he goes into the moon, his legs fuzz. They go on around the house toward the apple tree. What are they going to do, Dewey Dell? They went around the house toward the apple tree. I can smell her, I say. Can you smell her too?
Hush. The wind's changed. Go to sleep.
And so I am going to know where they stay at night soon. They come around the house, going across the yard in the moon, carrying her on their shoulders. They carry her down to the barn, the moon shining flat and quiet on her. Then they come back and go into the house again. While they were in the moon, Mr. Gillespie's boy's legs fuzzed. And then I waited and I said, Dewey Dell? And then I waited and then I went to find where they stay at night, and I saw something that Dewey Dell told me not to tell nobody.
Against the dark doorway, he seems to materialize out of darkness, lean as a racehorse in his underclothes in the beginning of the glare. He leaps to the ground with on his face an expression of furious unbelief. He has seen me without even turning his head or his eyes, in which the glare swims like two small torches.
Come on,
he says, leaping down the slope toward the barn. For an instant longer, he runs silver in the moonlight. Then he springs out like a flat figure cut leanly from tin against an abrupt and soundless explosion, as the whole loft of the barn takes fire at once, as though it had been stuffed with powder. The front, the conical facade with the square orifice of doorway, broken only by the square squat shape of the coffin on the sawhorses like a cubistic bug, conies into relief. Behind me, Pa and Gillespie and Mac and Dewey Dell and Vardaman emerge from the house. He pauses at the coffin, stooping, looking at me, his face furious. Overhead the flames sound like thunder. Across us rushes a cool draft. There is no heat in it at all yet, and a handful of chaff lifts suddenly and sucks swiftly along the stalls where a horse is screaming. Quick, I say, the horses. He glares a moment longer at me, then at the roof overhead. Then he leaps toward the stall, where the horse screams. It plunges and kicks, the sound of the crashing blows sucking up into the sound of the flames. They sound like an interminable train crossing an endless trestle. Gillespie and Mac pass me, in knee-length nightshirts, shouting, their voices thin and high and meaningless, and at the same time profoundly wild and sad.
Cal! Stall!
Gillespie's nightshirt rushes ahead of him on the draft, ballooning about his hairy thighs. The stall door has swung shut. Jewel thrusts it back with his buttocks, and he appears, his back arched, the muscles ridged through his garment as he drags the horse out by its head. In the glare, its eyes roll with soft, fleet, wild opaline fire. Its muscles bunch and run as it flings its head about, lifting Jewel clear of the ground. He drags it on, slowly, terrifically. Again he gives me across his shoulder a single glare, furious and brief. Even when they are clear of the barn, the horse continues to fight and lash backward toward the doorway until Gillespie passes me, stark naked, his nightshirt wrapped about the mule's head, and beats the maddened horse on out of the door. Jewel returns, running. Again he looks down at File Coffin, but he comes on.
"Where's Cow?"
he cries, passing me. I follow him. In the stall, Mac is struggling with the other mule. When its head turns into the glare, I can see the wild rolling of its eye too, but it makes no sound. It just stands there, watching Mac over its shoulder, swinging its hindquarters toward him whenever he approaches. He looks back at us, his eyes and mouth 3 round holes in his face on which the freckles look like English peas on a plate. His voice is thin, high, far away.
"I can't do nothing."
It is as though the sound had been swept from his lips and up and away, speaking back to us from an immense distance of exhaustion. Jewel slides past us. The mule whirls and lashes out, but he has already gained its head. I lean to Mac's ear, nightshirt, around his head. Mac stares at me. Then he rips the nightshirt off and flings it over the mule's head, and it becomes docile at once. Jewel is yelling at him.
"Cow? Cow?"
Back! Last stall!
The cow watches us as we enter. She is backed into the corner, head lowered, still chewing though rapidly, but she makes no move. Jewel has paused, looking up, and suddenly we watch the entire floor to the loft dissolve. It just turns to fire. A faint litter of sparks rains down. He glances about. Back under the trough is a 3-legged milking stool. He catches it up and swings it into the planking of the rear wall. He splinters a plank, then another, a third. We tear the fragments away. While we are stooping at the opening, something charges into us from behind. It is the cow. With a single whistling breath, she rushes between us and through the gap and into the outer glare, her tail erect and rigid as a broom nailed upright to the end of her spine. Jewel turns back into the barn. "Here," I say. "Jewel." I grasp at him. He strikes my hand down. "You fool," I say. "Don't you see you can't make it hack yonder?" The hallway looks like a searchlight turned into rain. "Come on, around this way." When we are through the gap, he begins to run. "Jewel," I say, running. He darts around the corner. When I reach it, he has almost reached the next one, running against the glare like that figure cut from tin. Pa and Gillespie and Mac are some distance away, watching the barn, pink against the darkness where for the time the moonlight has been vanquished. "Catch him!" I cry. "Stop him!" When I reach the front, he is struggling with Gillespie, the one lean-in underclothes, the other stark naked. They are like 2 figures in a Greek frieze, isolated out of all reality by the red glare. Before I can reach them, he has struck Gillespie to the ground and turned and run back into the barn. The sound of it has become quite peaceful now, like the sound of the river did. We watch through the dissolving proscenium of the doorway as Jewel runs, crouching to the far end of the coffin and stoops to it. For an instant, he looks up and out at us through the rain of burning hay like a portiere of flaming beads, and I can see his mouth shape as he calls my name.
"Jewel. Jewel."
It seems to me that I now hear the accumulation of her voice through the last 5 minutes, and I hear her scuffling and struggling as Pa and Mac hold her, screaming,
"Jewel. Jewel."
But he is no longer looking at us. We see his shoulders strain as he upends the coffin and slides it single-handed from the sawhorses. It looms unbelievably tall, hiding him. I would not have believed that Addie Bundren would have needed that much room to lie comfortable in. For another instant, it stands upright, while the sparks rain on it in scattering bursts, as though they engendered other sparks from the contact. Then it topples forward, gaining momentum, revealing Jewel, and the sparks raining on him too and engendering gusts so that he appears to be enclosed in a thin nimbus of fire. Without stopping, it overends and rears again, pauses, then crashes slowly forward and through the curtain. This time, Jewel is riding upon it, clinging to it, until it crashes down and flings him forward and clear, and Mac leaps forward into a thin smell of scorching meat and slaps at the widening crimson-edged holes that bloom like flowers in his undershirt.
When I went to find where they stay at night, I saw something. They said, "Where's Darl?" Where did Darl go? They carried her back under the apple tree. The barn was still red, but it wasn't a barn now. It was sunk down, and the red went swirling up. The barn went swirling up in little red pieces, against the sky and the stars so that the stars moved backward. And then Cash was still awake. He turned his head from side to side, with sweat on his face.
Do you want some more water on it, Cash?
Cash's leg and foot turned black. We held the lamp and looked at Cash's foot and leg where it was black. Your foot looks like a black person's foot, Cash, I said.
I reckon we'll have to bust it off.
What in the tarnation you put it on there for?
I thought it would steady it some. I just aimed to help him.
They got the flat iron and the hammer. Dewey Dell held the lamp. They had to hit it hard. And then Cash went to sleep. He's asleep now, I said. It can't hurt him while he's asleep. It just cracked. It wouldn't come off.
It'll take the hide too. Why in the tarnation you put it on there? Didn't none of you think to grease his leg first?
I just aimed to help him. It was Darl put it on.
Where's Darl? They said.
Didn't none of you have more sense than that? I'd have thought he would anyway.
Jewel was lying on his face. His back was red. Dewey Dell put the medicine on it. The medicine was made out of butter and soot, to draw out the fire. Then his back was black. Does it hurt, Jewel? I said. Your back looks like a black person's, Jewel, I said. Cash's foot and leg looked like a black person's. Then they broke it off. Cash's leg bled.
You go on back and lay down. You ought to be asleep.
Where's Darl? They said. He's out there under the apple tree with her, lying on her. He's there so the cat won't come back. I said, are you going to keep the cat away, Darl? The moonlight dappled on him too. On her it was still, but on Darl it dappled up and down. You needn't to cry, I said. Jewel got her out. You needn't to cry, Darl. The barn is still red. It used to be redder than this. Then it went swirling, making the stars run backward without falling. It hurt my heart like the train did. When I went to find where they stay at night, I saw something that Dewey Dell says I mustn't tell nobody.
We have been passing the signs for some time now. The drug stores, the clothing stores, the patent medicine, and the garages and cafes, and the mile boards diminishing, becoming more starkly reaccruent. 3 miles, 2 miles. From the crest of a hill, as we get into the wagon again, we can see the smoke, low and flat, seemingly unmoving in the unwinded afternoon.
Is that a Darl? Is that Jefferson?
He too has lost flesh. Like ours, his face has an expression strained, dreamy, and gaunt. Yes, I say. He lifts his head and looks at the sky. High against it they hand in narrowing circles like the smoke, with an outward semblance of from and purpose, but with no inference of motion, progress, or retrograde. We mount the wagon again where Cash lies on the box, the jagged shards of cement cracked about his leg. The shabby mules droop rattling and clanking down the hill.
We'll have to take him to the doctor. I reckon it ain't no way around it.
The back of Jewel's shirt, where it touches him, stains slow and black with grease. Life was created in the valleys. It blew up onto the hills on the old terrors, the old lusts, the old despairs. That's why you must walk up the hills so you can ride down. Dewey Dell sits on the seat, the newspaper package on her lap. When we reach the foot of the hill where the road flattens between close walls of trees, she begins to look about quietly from one side of the road to the other. At last she says,
I got to stop.
Pa looks at her, his shabby profile that of anticipant and disgruntled annoyance. He does not check the team.
What for?
I got to go to the bushes.
Pa does not check the team.
Can't you wait till we get to town? It ain't over a mile now.
Stop. I got to go to the bushes.
Pa stops in the middle of the road and we watch Dewey Dell descend, carrying the package. She does not look back. Why not leave your cakes here? I say. We'll watch them. She descends steadily, not looking at us.
How would she know where to go if she waited till we get to town? Where would you go to do it in town? Dewey Dell?
She lifts the package down and turns and disappears among the trees and undergrowth.
Don't be no longer than you can help. We ain't got no time to waste.
She does not answer. After a while, we cannot hear her even.
We ought to done like Armstid and Gillespie said and sent word to town and had it dug and ready.
Why didn't you, I say? You could have telephoned.
What for? Who the hell can't dig a hole in the ground?
A car comes over the hill. It begins to sound the torn, slowing. It runs along the roadside in low gear, the outside wheels in the ditch, and passes us and goes on. Vardaman watches it until it is out of sight.
How far is it now, Darl?
Not far.
We ought to done it. I just never wanted to be beholden to none except her flesh and blood.
Who the hell can't dig a damn hole in the ground?
It ain't respectful, talking that way about her grave. You all don't know what it is. You never pure loved her, none of you.
Jewel does not answer. He sits a little stiffly erect, his body arched away from his shirt. His high-colored jaw juts. Dewey Dell returns. We watch her emerge from the bushes, carrying the package, and climb into the wagon. She now wears her Sunday dress, her beads, her shoes and stockings.
I thought I told you to leave them close to home.
She does not answer, does not look at us. She sets the package in the wagon and gets in. The wagon moves on.
How many more hills now, Darl?
Just one, I say. The next one goes right up into town. This hill is red sand, bordered on either hand by black folks' cabins. Against the sky ahead the massed telephone lines run, and the clock on the courthouse lifts among the trees. In the sand the wheels whisper, as though the very earth would hush our entry. We descend as the hill commences to rise. We follow the wagon, the whispering wheels, passing the cabins where faces come suddenly to the doors, white-eyed. We hear sudden voices, ejaculant. Jewel has been looking from side to side. Now his head turns forward and I can see his ears taking on a still deeper tone of furious red. 3 black people walk beside the road ahead of us. 10 feet ahead of them, a white man walks. When we pass the black folk, their heads turn suddenly with that expression of shock and instinctive outrage.
Great God! What they got in that wagon?
Jewel whirls.
Son of a bitches.
As he does so, he is abreast of the white man, who has paused. It is as though Jewel had gone blind for the moment, for it is the white man toward whom he whirls.
Darl.
Cash says from the wagon. I grasp at Jewel. The white man has fallen back a pace, his face still slack-jawed, then his jaw tightens, claps to. Jewel leans above him, his jaw muscles gone white.
What did you say?
Here, I say. He don't mean anything, mister, Jewel, I say. When I touch him, he swings at the man. I grasp his arm. We struggle. Jewel has never looked at me. He is trying to free his arm. When I see the man again, he has an open knife in his hand. Hold up, mister, I say. I've got him. Jewel, I say.
Thinks because he's a goddamn town fellow.
Jewel says, panting, wrenching at me.
Son of a bitch.
The man moves. He begins to edge around me, watching Jewel, the knife low against his flank.
Can't no man call me that.
Paw has got down, and Dewey Dell is holding Jewel, pushing at him. I release him and face the man. Wait, I say, he don't mean nothing. He's sick, got burned in a fire last night, and he ain't himself.
Fire or no fire, can't no man call me that.
He thought you said something to him.
I never said nothing to him. I never see him before. 'Fore God. 'Fore God.
I know. He never meant anything. He'll take it back.
Let him take it back then.
Put up your knife, and he will. The man looks at me. He looks at Jewel. Jewel is quiet now. Put up your knife, I say. The man shuts the knife.
'Fore God. 'Fore God.
Tell him you didn't mean anything, Jewel, I say.
I thought he said something. Just because he's...
Hush. Tell him you didn't mean it.
I didn't mean it.
He better not. Calling me a...
Do you think he's afraid to call you that? I say. The man looks at me.
I never said that.
Don't think it either.
Shut up, I say. Come on, drive on, Pa. The wagon moves. The man stands watching us. Jewel does not look back.
Jewel would have whipped him.
We approach the crest, where the street runs, where cars go back and forth. The mules haul the wagon up and onto the crest and the street. Pa stops them. The street runs on ahead, where the square opens, and the monument stands before the courthouse. We mount again while the heads turn with that expression which we know, "Save Jewel." He does not get on, even though the wagon has started again. "Get in, Jewel," I say. "Come on, let's get away from here." But he does not get in. Instead, he sets his foot on the turning hub of the rear wheel, one hand grasping the stanchion, and with the hub turning smoothly under his sole, he lifts the other foot and squats there, staring straight ahead, motionless, lean, wooden-backed, as though carved, squatting out of the lean wood.
It wasn't nothing else to do. It was either send him to Jackson, or have Gillespie sue us, because he knowed some way that Darl set fire to it. I don't know how he knowed, but he did. Vardaman see him do it, but he swore he never told nobody but Dewey Dell and that she told him not to tell nobody. But Gillespie knowed it. But he would have suspicioned it sooner or later. He could have done it that night just watching the way Darl acted.
I reckon there ain't nothing else to do.
You want to fix him now?
Fix him?
Catch him and tie him up. God damn it, do you want to wait until he sets fire to the goddamn team and wagon?
But there wasn't no use in that. There ain't no use in that, I said. We can wait till she is underground. A fellow that's going to spend the rest of his life locked up, he ought to be let to have what pleasure he can have before he goes.
I reckon he ought to be there. God knows, it's a trial on me. Seems like it ain't no end to bad luck when once it starts.
Sometimes I ain't so sure who's got a right to say when a man is crazy and when he ain't. Sometimes I think it ain't none of us pure crazy and ain't none of us pure sane until the balance of us talks him that away. It's like it ain't so much what a fellow does, but it's the way the majority of folks is looking at him when he does it. Because Jewel is too hard on him. Of course it was Jewel's horse was traded to get her that night of town, and in a sense it was the value of his horse Darl tried to burn up. But I thought more than once before we crossed the river and after, how it would be God's blessing if he did take her out in our hands and get shut of her in some clean way, and it seemed to me that when Jewel worked so to get her out in the river, he was going against God in a way, and then when Darl seen that it looked like one of us would have to do something, I can almost believe he done right in a way. But I don't reckon nothing excuses setting fire to a man's barn and endangering his stock and destroying his property. That's how I reckon a man is crazy. That's how he can't see eye to eye with other folks. And I reckon they ain't nothing else to do with him but what the most folks says is right. But it's a shame, in a way. Folks seems to get away from the old and right teaching that says to drive the nails down and trim the edges well always like it was for your own use and comfort you were making it. It's like some folks has the smooth, pretty boards to build a courthouse with and others don't have no more than rough lumber fittin' to build a chicken coop. But it's better to build a tight chicken coop than a shoddy courthouse, and when they both build shoddy or build well, neither because it's one or the other is going to make a man feel the better nor the worse. So we went up the street, toward the square, and he said,
"We better take Cash to the doctor first. We can leave him there and come back for him."
That's it. It's because me and him was born close together, and at night 10 years before Jewel and Dewey Dell and Vardaman begun to come along. I feel kin to them, all right, but I don't know. And me being the oldest, and thinking already the very thing that he done, I don't know. Paul was looking at me, then at him, mumbling his mouth. "Go on," I said. "We'll get it done first."
She would want us all there.
"Let's take Cash to the doctor first. She'll wait. She's already waited 9 days.
You all don't know. There's somebody you was young with and you growed old in her and she growed old in you, seeing the old coming on. And it was the one somebody you could hear say, 'It don't matter,' and know it was the truth out of the hard world, and all a man's grief and trials. You all don't know."
We got the digging to do too.
Armstid and Gillespie both told you to send word ahead. Don't you want to go to Peabody's now, Cash?
Go on. It feels right easy now. It's best to get things done in the right place.
If it was just Doug. We forgot our spade, too.
Yes, I'll go to the hardware store. We'll have to buy one.
It'll cost money.
Do you begrudge her it?
Go on and get a spade. Here. Give me the money.
But Pa didn't stop.
I reckon we can get a spade. I reckon there are Christians here.
So Darl sat still and we went on, with Jewel squatting on the tailgate, watching the back of Darl's head. He looked like one of these bulldogs, one of these dogs that don't bark none, squatting against the rope, watching the thing he was waiting to jump at. He sat that way all the time we was in front of Mrs. Bundren's house, hearing the music, watching the back of Darl's head with them hard white eyes of his. The music was playing in the house. It was one of them graphophones. It was natural as a music band.
Do you want to go to Peabody's? They can wait here and tell Pa, and I'll drive you to Peabody's and come back for them.
No, I said. It was better to get her underground. Now we was this close, just waiting until Pa borrowed the shovel. He drove along the street until we could hear the music.
Maybe they got one here.
He pulled up at Mrs. Bundren's. It was like he knowed. Sometimes I think that if a working man could see work as far ahead as a lazy man can see laziness. So he stopped there like he knowed, before that little new house, where the music was. We waited there, hearing it. I believe I could have dickered Sir it down to $5 on that one of his. It's a comfortable thing, music is.
Maybe they got one here.
You want Jewel to go, or do you reckon I better?
I reckon I better.
He got down and went up the path and around the house to the back. The music stopped, then it started again.
He'll get it too.
I said.
I said. It was just like he knowed, like he could see through the walls and into the next 10 minutes. Only it was more than 10 minutes. The music stopped and never commenced again for a good spell, where her and Paul was talking at the back. We waited in the wagon.
You let me take you back to Peabody's.
No. We'll get her underground.
If he ever gets back.
He begun to cuss. He started to get down from the wagon.
I'm going.
Then we saw Pa coming back. He had 2 spades, coming around the house. He laid them in the wagon and got in and we went on. The music never started again. Pa was looking back at the house. He kind of lifted his hand a little and I saw the shade pulled back a little at the window and her face in it. But the curiousest thing was Dewey Dell. It surprised me. I see all the while how folks could say he was queer, but that was the very reason couldn't nobody hold it personal. It was like he was outside of it too, same as you, and getting mad at it would be kind of like getting mad at a mud puddle that splashed you when you stepped in it. And then I always kind of had an idea that him and Dewey Dell kind of knowed things betwixt them. If I'd have said it was e'er one of us she liked better than e'er other, I'd have said it was Darl. But when we got it filled and covered and drove out the gate and turned into the lane where them fellows was waiting, when they come out and come on him and he jerked back, it was Dewey Dell that was on him before even Jewel could get at him. And then I believed I knowed how Gillespie knowed about how his barn taken fire. She hadn't said a word, hadn't even looked at him, but when them fellows told him what they wanted and that they had come to get him and he throwed back, she jumped on him like a wildcat so that one of the fellows had to quit and hold her and her scratching and clawing at him like a wildcat, while the other one and Pa and Jewel throwed Darl down and held him lying on his back, looking up at me.
I thought you would have told me. I never thought you wouldn't have.
Darl, I said. But he fought again, him and Jewel and the fellow, and the other one holding Dewey Dell and Vardaman yelling and Jewel saying,
Kill him. Kill the son of a bitch.
It was bad so. It was bad. A fellow can't get away from a shoddy job. He can't do it. I tried to tell him, but he just said,
I thought you'd have told me. It's not that.
He said, then he begun to laugh. The other fellow pulled Jewel off of him and he sat there on the ground, laughing. I tried to tell him. If I could have just moved, even set up. But I tried to tell him, and he quit laughing, looking up at me.
Do you want me to go?
It'll be better for you, I said. Down there it'll be quiet, with none of the bothering and such. It'll be better for you, Darl, I said.
Better?
He began to laugh again.
Better?
He couldn't hardly say it for laughing. He sat on the ground and us watching him, laughing and laughing. It was bad. It was bad so. I'd be darned if I could see anything to laugh at. Because there just ain't nothing justifies the deliberate destruction of what a man has built with his own sweat and stored the fruit of his sweat into. But I ain't so sure that a man has the right to say what is crazy and what ain't. It's like there was a fellow in every man that's done past the sanity or the insanity, that watches the sane and the insane doings of that man with the same horror and the same astonishment.
I said, I reckon a man in a tight might let Bill Varner patch him up like a damn mule, but I be damned if the man that'd let Ance Bundren treat him with raw cement ain't got more spare legs than I have.
They just aimed to ease hit some.
Aimed? Hell. What in hell did Armstid mean by even letting them put you on that wagon again?
It was getting right noticeable. We never had time to wait.
I just looked at him.
It never bothered me none.
Don't you lie there and try to tell me you rode 6 days on a wagon without springs, with a broken leg, and it never bothered you.
It never bothered me much.
You mean, it never bothered Ance much? No more than it bothered him to throw that poor devil down in the public street and handcuff him like a damn murderer? Don't tell me. And don't tell me it ain't going to bother you to lose 60-odd square inches of skin to get that concrete off. And don't tell me it ain't going to bother you to have to limp around on one short leg for the balance of your life. If you walk at all again. Concrete. God Almighty, why didn't Ance carry you to the nearest sawmill and stick your leg in the saw? That would have cured it. Then you all could have stuck his head into the saw and cured a whole family. Where is Ance, anyway? What's he up to now?
He's taking back them spades he borrowed.
That's right. Of course he'd have to borrow a spade to bury his wife with. Unless he could borrow a hole in the ground. Too bad you all didn't put him in it too. Does that hurt?
Not to speak of.
And the sweat big as marbles running down his face, and his face about the color of blotting paper. Course not. About next summer you can hobble around fine on this leg. Then it won't bother you, not to speak of. If you had anything you could call luck, you might say it was lucky this is the same leg you broke before.
That's what Paul says.
It happened I'm back of the prescription case, pouring up some chocolate sauce, when Jody comes back and says,
Say, Skeet, there's a woman up front that wants to see the doctor. And when I said, what doctor you want to see? She said she wants to see the doctor that works here. And when I said, there ain't any doctor works here, she just stood there, looking back this way.
What kind of a woman is it? Tell her to go upstairs to Alfred's office.
Country woman.
Send her to the courthouse. Tell her all the doctors have gone to Memphis to a barber's convention.
All right. She looks pretty good for a country girl.
Wait, I says. He waited and I went and peeped through the crack. But I couldn't tell nothing except she had a good leg against the light. Is she young, you say?
She looks like a pretty hot mama for a country girl.
Take this, I says, giving him the chocolate. I took off my apron and went up there. She looked pretty good. One of them black-eyed ones that look like she'd as soon put a knife in you as not if you two-timed her. She looked pretty good. There wasn't nobody else in the store, it was dinner time. What can I do for you?
Are you the doctor?
Sure, I says. She quit looking at me and was kind of looking around.
Can we go back yonder?
It was just 12:15, but I went and told Jody to kind of watch out and whistle if the old man come in sight, because he never got back before 1.
You better lay off of that. He'll fire your stern out of here so quick you can't wink.
He don't never get back before 1. You can see him go into the post office. You keep your eye peeled now, and give me a whistle.
What you going to do?
You keep your eye out. I'll tell you later.
Ain't you going to give me no seconds on it?
What the hell do you think this is? A stud farm? You watch out for him. I'm going into conference. So I go on to the back. I stopped at the glass and smoothed my hair, then I went behind the prescription case, where she was waiting. She is looking at the medicine cabinet, then she looks at me. Now, madam. What is your trouble?
It's the female trouble. I got the money.
Ah. Have you got female troubles or do you want female troubles? If so, you come to the right doctor. Them country people. Half the time they don't know what they want, and the balance of the time they can't tell it to you. The clock said 12:20.
No.
No which?
I ain't had it. That's it.
She looked at me.
I got the money.
So I knew what she was talking about. Oh. You got something in your belly you wish you didn't have. She looks at me. You wish you had a little more or a little less, huh?
I got the money. He said I could get something at the drugstore for it.
Who said so?
He did.
You don't want to call no names. The one that put the acorn in your belly? He the one that told you? She don't say nothing. You ain't married, are you? I never saw no ring. But like as not, they ain't heard yet out there that they use rings.
I got the money.
She showed it to me, tied up in her handkerchief, a 10 spot. I'll swear you have. He give it to you?
Yes.
Which one? She looks at me. Which one of them give it to you?
It ain't but one.
She looks at me. Go on, I says. She don't say nothing. The trouble about the cellar is, it ain't but one way out and that's back up the inside stairs. The clock says 25:1. A pretty girl like you. She looks at me. She begins to tie the money back up in the handkerchief. Excuse me a minute, I says. I go around the prescription case. Did you hear about that fellow sprained his ear? I says. After that he couldn't even hear a belch.
You better get her out from back there before the old man comes.
If you'll stay up there in front where he pays you to stay, he won't catch nobody but me, I says. He goes on, slow, toward the front.
What you doing to her, Skeet?
I can't tell you, I says. It wouldn't be ethical. You go on up there and watch.
Say, Skeet.
Go on. I ain't doing nothing but filling a prescription.
He may not do nothing about that woman back there, but if he finds you monkeying with that prescription case, he'll kick your stern clean down them cellar stairs.
My stern has been kicked by bigger bastards than him. Go back and watch out for him, now. So I come back. The clock said 15:1. She is tying the money in a handkerchief.
You ain't the doctor.
Sure I am. She watches me. Is it because I look too young, or am I too handsome? We used to have a bunch of old water-jointed doctors here. Jefferson used to be a kind of old doctor's home for them. But business started falling off and folks stayed so well until one day they found out that the women would never get sick at all. So they run all the old doctors out and got us young good-looking ones that the women would like, and then the women begun to get sick again and so business picked up. They're doing that all over the country. Hadn't you heard about it? Maybe it's because you ain't never needed a doctor.
I need one now.
And you come to the right one. I already told you that.
Have you got something for it? I got the money.
Well, of course a doctor has to learn all sorts of things while he's learning to roll calomel. He can't help himself. But I don't know about your trouble.
He told me I could get something. He told me I could get it at the drugstore.
Did he tell you the name of it? You better go back and ask him. She quit looking at me, kind of turning the handkerchief in her hands.
I got to do something.
How bad do you want to do something? She looks at me. Of course, a doctor learns all sorts of things folks don't think he knows. But he ain't supposed to tell all he knows. It's against the law. Up front, Jody says.
Skeet.
Excuse me a minute. I went up front. Do you see him?
Ain't you done yet? Maybe you better come up here and watch and let me do that consulting.
Maybe you'll lay an egg, I says. I come back. She is looking at me. Of course you realize that I could be put in the penitentiary for doing what you want, I says. I would lose my license and then I'd have to go to work. You realize that?
I ain't got but $10. I could bring the rest next month, maybe.
Pooh, I says, $10? You see, I can't put no price on my knowledge and skill. Certainly not for no little paltry sawbuck. She looks at me. She don't even blink.
What you want, then?
The clock said 4 to 1. So I decided I better get her out. You guess 3 times and then I'll show you, I says. She don't even blink her eyes.
I got to do something.
She looks behind her and around, then she looks toward the front.
Gimme the medicine first.
You mean, you're ready to write now? I says. Here?
Gimme the medicine first.
So I took a graduated glass and kind of turned my back to her and picked out a bottle that looked all right, because a man that would keep poison sitting around in an unlabeled bottle ought to be in jail, anyway. It smelled like turpentine. I poured some into the glass and give it to her. She smelled it, looking at me across the glass.
It smells like turpentine.
Sure, I says. That's just the beginning of the treatment. You come back at 10 o'clock tonight and I'll give you the rest of it and perform the operation.
Operation?
It won't hurt you. You've had the same operation before. Ever hear about the hair of the dog? She looks at me.
Will it work?
Sure it'll work. If you come back and get it. So she drunk whatever it was without batting an eye, and went out. I went up front.
Didn't you get it?
Get what?
Ah, come on. I ain't going to try to beat your time.
Oh, her. She just wanted a little medicine. She's got a bad case of dysentery and she's a little ashamed about mentioning it with a stranger there. It was my night, anyway, so I helped the old bastard check up and I got his hat on him and got him out of the store by 8:30. I went as far as the corner with him and watched him until he passed under 2 street lamps and went on out of sight. Then I come back to the store and waited until 9:30 and turned out the front lights and locked the door and left just one light burning at the back, and I went back and put some talcum powder into 6 capsules and cleared up the cellar and then I was all ready. She come in just at 10, before the clock had done striking. I let her in and she come in, walking fast. I looked out the door, but there wasn't nobody but a boy in overalls sitting on the curb. You want something? I says. He never said nothing, just looking at me. I locked the door and turned off the light and went on back. She was waiting. She didn't look at me now.
Where is it?
I gave her the box of capsules. She held the box in her hand, looking at the capsules.
Are you sure it'll work?
Sure, I says. When you take the rest of the treatment.
Where do I take it?
Down in the cellar.
Now it is wider and lighter, but the stores are dark because they have all gone home. The stores are dark, but the lights pass on the windows when we pass. The lights are in the trees around the courthouse. They roost in the trees, but the courthouse is dark. The clock on it looks 4 ways, because it is not dark. The moon is not dark too. Not very dark. Darl he went to Jackson, is my brother, Darl is my brother. Only it was over that way, shining on the track. Let's go that way, Dewey Dell, I say.
What for?
The track went shining around the window, it read on the track. But she said he would not sell it to the town boys.
But it will be their Christmas. You'll have to wait till then, when he brings it back.
Darl went to Jackson. Lots of people didn't go to Jackson. Darl is my brother. My brother is going to Jackson. While we walk the lights go around, roosting in the trees. On all sides it is the same. They go around the courthouse and then you cannot see them. But you can see them in the black windows beyond. They have all gone home to bed except me and Dewey Dell. Going on the train to Jackson. My brother. There's a light in the store, far back. In the window are 2 big glasses of soda water, red and green. 2 men could not drink them. 2 mules could not. 2 cows could not. Darl. A man comes to the door. He looks at Dewey Dell.
You wait out here.
Why can't I come in? I want to come in too.
You wait out here.
All right, Dewey Dell goes in. Darl is my brother. Darl went crazy. The walk is harder than sitting on the ground. He is in the open door. He looks at me.
You want something?
His head is slick. Jewel's head is slick sometimes. Cash's head is not slick. Darl he went to Jackson. My brother Darl. In the street, he ate a banana. Wouldn't you rather have bananas? Dewey Dell said. You wait till Christmas. It'll be there then. Then you can see it. So we are going to have some bananas. We are going to have a bag full, me and Dewey Dell. He locks the door. Dewey Dell is inside. Then the light winks out. He went to Jackson. He went crazy and went to Jackson both. Lots of people didn't go crazy. Paul and Cash and Jewel and Dewey Dell and me didn't go crazy. We never did go crazy. We didn't go to Jackson either. Darl. I hear the cow a long time, clopping on the street. Then she comes into the square. She goes across the square, her head down clopping. She lows. There was nothing in the square before she lowed, but it wasn't empty. Now it is empty after she lowed. She goes on, clopping. She lows. My brother is Darl. He went to Jackson on the train. He didn't go on the train to go crazy. He went crazy in our wagon. Darl she has been in there a long time. And the cow is gone too. A long time. She has been in there longer than the cow was. But not as long as empty. Darl is my brother. My brother Darl. Dewey Dell comes out. She looks at me. Let's go around that way now. She looks at me.
It ain't going to work. That son of a bitch.
What ain't going to work, Dewey Dell?
I just know it won't.
She is not looking at anything.
I just know it.
Let's go that way.
We got to go back to the hotel. It's late. We got to slip back in.
Can't we go by and see anyway?
Hadn't you rather have bananas? Hadn't you rather?
All right. My brother he went crazy and he went to Jackson too. Jackson is further away than crazy.
It won't work. I just know it won't.
What won't work? I say. He had to get on the train to go to Jackson. I have not been on the train, but Darl has been on the train. Darl. Darl is my brother. Darl. Darl.
Darl has gone to Jackson. They put him on the train, laughing, down the long car laughing, the heads turning like the heads of owls when he passed. "What are you laughing at?" I said. "Yes, yes, 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 yes." 2 men put him on the train. They wore mismatched coats, bulging behind over their right hip pockets. Their necks were shaved to a hairline, as though the recent and simultaneous barbers had had a chalk line like Cash's. "Is it the pistols you're laughing at?" I said. "Why do you laugh?" I said. "Is it because you hate the sound of laughing?" They pulled 2 seats together so Darl could sit by the window to laugh. One of them sat beside him, the other sat on the seat facing him, riding backward. One of them had to ride backward because the state's money has a face to each backside and a backside to each face, and they are riding on the state's money, which is incest. A nickel has a woman on one side and a buffalo on the other. 2 faces and no back. I don't know what that is. Darl had a little spyglass he got in France at the war. In it had a woman and a pig with 2 backs and no face. I know what that is. Is that why you are laughing, Darl? Yes, 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 yes. The wagon stands on the square, hitched, the mules motionless, the reins wrapped about the seat spring, the back of the wagon toward the courthouse. It looks no different from 100 other wagons there. Jewel standing beside it and looking up the street like any other man in town that day. Yet there is something different, distinctive. There is about it that unmistakable air of definite and imminent departure that trains have, perhaps due to the fact that Dewey Dell and Vardaman on the seat and Cash on a pallet in the wagon bed are eating bananas from a paper bag. Is that why you are laughing, Darl? Darl is our brother Darl. Our brother Darl in a cage in Jackson, where, his grimed hands lying light in the quiet interstices, looking out he foams. Yes, 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 yes.
When he saw the money, I said, "It's not my money, it doesn't belong to me."
Whose is it then?
"It's Cora Toll's money. It's Mrs. Toll's. I sold the cakes for it."
$10 for 2 cakes?
"Don't you touch it. It's not mine."
You never had them cakes. It's a lie. It was them Sunday clothes you had in that package.
"Don't you touch it. If you take it, you are a thief."
My own daughter accuses me of being a thief. My own daughter.
Paul.
I have fed you and sheltered you. I give you love and care, yet my own daughter, the daughter of nay dead wife, calls me a thief over her mother's grave.
"It's not mine, I tell you. If it was, God knows you could have it."
Where did you get $10?
Paul.
You won't tell me. Did you come by it so shamefully you dare not?
"It's not mine, I tell you. Can't you understand it's not mine?"
It's not like I wouldn't pay it back. But she calls her own father a thief.
"I can't, I tell you. I tell you it's not my money. God knows you could have it."
I wouldn't take it. My own born daughter that has ate my food for 17 years begrudges me the loan of $10.
"It's not mine. I can't."
Whose is it then?
"It was given to me. To buy something with."
To buy what with?
Paul.
It's just a loan. God knows, I hate for my blood and children to reproach me. But I give them what was mine without stint. Cheerful I give them, without stint. And now they deny me. Addie. It was lucky for you you died, Addie.
Paul.
God knows it is.
He took the money and went out.
So when we stopped there to borrow the shovels, we heard the graphophone playing in the house, and so when we got done with the shovels, Pa says,
I reckon I'd better take them back.
So we went back to the house.
We better take Cash on to Peabody's.
It won't take but a minute.
He got down from the wagon. The music was not playing now.
Let Vardaman do it. He can do it in half the time you can. Or here, you let me.
I reckon I better do it. Long as it was me that borrowed them.
So we sat in the wagon, but the music wasn't playing now. I reckon it's a good thing we ain't got arrow one of them. I reckon I wouldn't never get no work done at all for listening to it. I don't know if a little music ain't about the nicest thing a fellow can have. Seems like when he comes in tired of a night, it ain't nothing could rest him like having a little music played and him resting. I have seen them that shuts up like a hand grip, with a handle and all, so a fellow can carry it with him wherever he wants.
What you reckon he's doing? I could have toted them shovels back and forth 10 times by now.
Let him take his time, I said. He ain't as spry as you, remember?
Why didn't he let me take them back then? We got to get your leg fixed up so we can start home tomorrow.
We got plenty of time. I wonder what them machines costs on the installment.
Installment of what? What you got to buy it with?
A fellow can't tell. I could have bought that one from Surrey for $5, I believe. And so Pa come back and we went to Peabody's. While we was there, Pa said he was going to the barber shop and get a shave. And so that night he said he had some business to tend to, kind of looking away from us while he said it, with his hair combed wet and slick and smelling sweet with perfume. But I said leave him be, I wouldn't mind hearing a little more of that music myself. And so next morning he was gone again. Then he come back and told us to get hitched up and ready to take out and he would meet us, and when they was gone he said,
I don't reckon you got no more money.
Peabody just give me enough to pay the hotel with. We don't need nothing else, do we?
No. We don't need nothing.
He stood there, not looking at me. If it is something we got to have, I reckon maybe Peabody.
No, it ain't nothing else. You all wait for me at the corner.
So Jewel got the team and come for me, and they fixed me a pallet in the wagon, and we drove across the square to the corner where Pa said, and we was waiting there in the wagon, with Dewey Dell and Vardaman eating bananas, when we see them coming up the street. Pa was coming along with that kind of daresome and hangdog look all at once, like when he has been up to something he knows Ma ain't going to like, carrying a grip in his hand, and Jewel says,
Who's that?
Then we see it wasn't the grip that made him look different, it was his face, and Jewel says,
He got them teeth.
It was a fact. It made him look a foot taller, kind of holding his head up, hangdog and proud too, and then we see her behind him, carrying the other grip. A kind of duck-shaped woman all dressed up, with them kind of hard-looking pop eyes like she was daring a man to say nothing. And there we sat watching them, with Dewey Dell's and Vardaman's mouth half open and half ate bananas in their hands, and her coming around from behind Pa, looking at us like she dared a man. And then I see that the grip she was carrying was one of them little graphophones. It was for a fact, all shut up as pretty as a picture, and every time a new record would come from the mail order and us sitting in the house in the winter, listening to it, I would think what a shame Darl couldn't be to enjoy it too. But it is better so for him. This world is not his world, this life is life.
It's Cash and Jewel and Vardaman and Dewey Dell.
Pa says, kind of hangdog and proud too, with his teeth and all, even if he wouldn't look at us.
Meet Mrs. Bundren.